Hello. This is actually going to be a video response to Prof. MTH in his video titled Human Sacrifice in the Bible. I'm going to have to bust this up a little bit because every time I've done the video or attempted to do the audio, I keep going 12 minutes no matter what I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend this video talking about the issues surrounding Jesus and Isaac, and then the next video I'm going to specifically talk about Japheth. And I'm also going to put a picture of a sunset up because I just feel like being on the beach. So I want to start off by quoting, or at least referencing, all the passages that in the Old Testament that indicate that human sacrifice is wrong. Now, some of the passages reference Molach, some don't. Leviticus 18:21, Leviticus 20 verses 2 through 5. Now, that's the passage that Prof brought up in his video, but he made an issue of the fact that it seemed that the problem was the sacrifice to Molech. I want to demonstrate here in a second that's not the case, but that is one of the passages. You have 2 Kings 23:10. Jeremiah 32:35, 2 Kings 16:3, 2 Kings 17:31 and 32. Excuse me, let me restate that. 2 Kings 17:31 and 2 Kings 21:6. Jeremiah 7:31, Deuteronomy 18:10, 2 Kings 23:10, Ezekiel 20:25 through 26 and verse 31, and Deuteronomy chapter 12 verse 31. We'll quote that in a second, but I'm gonna list all these passages to the right in the description box. So you guys, if you want to look at them, you can look them up for yourself. Quoting Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 31, it states, "And you must not worship the Lord your God in their way." And there is, by the way, is a reference to the Canaanites. "You shall not worship the Lord your God in their way, because in worshiping their gods they do all types or all kinds of detestable things the Lord hates. They even burn their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifice to their gods." Clearly the problem here is not the fact that the Canaanites are worshiping other gods. The problem is they do detestable things in worship to their God. And the example given is the sacrifice of sons and daughters, or human sacrifice. That verse right there should put it to bed. That verse right there says that God hates human sacrifice. I don't even need to go any further. Now, in keeping let's go ahead and touch on some of the issues that Prof brought up. First of all, he brought up the fact that the Israelites are commanded to give their firstborn sons to God, and that is true. The Israelites are commanded to give their firstborn sons to God, along with the firstborn of the cattle and the sheep. However, later the firstborn are to be redeemed by a sacrifice or substitute sacrifice of some type of animal. Look at Genesis 22:13, Exodus 13:13, Exodus 13:15, and Exodus 34:20. In other words, there's no human sacrifice here. Then we go to the issue of Jesus. I want to touch on that one first. There are prohibitions against, a lot of the prohibitions that I just read off in the Old Testament about human sacrifice oftentimes involve children, or children's sacrifice. And the problem with child sacrifice is children's sacrifice was considered cases of murder. Look at Psalms 106 verse 34, Ezekiel 23:37, and Jeremiah 19:4. And by the way, it should be pointed out, anytime you see the words the shedding of innocent blood, that's the Old Testament's description of murder, basically, is what that is. And all those verses connect child sacrifice or child sacrifice with murder in that way. Now, obviously, in the case of Jesus, Jesus was not a child, and he was not innocent at the point of punishment or crucifixion. In other words, the New Testament teaches that this was justice, not murder. Look at 2 Corinthians 5:21 and 1 Peter 2:24. The writers of the New Testament saw this as a punishment for sin. Also, it should be pointed out that Jesus himself stated that it is a moral goodness to give oneself sacrificially for others. And I can tell you, well, let me just quote John 15:13. It says, "Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends." I can tell you, as a former military member and someone who's lost friends in our recent wars, I just don't look at someone who lays down their life for their buddies as or sacrificially lays down their lives for others as human sacrifice per se. I'm sorry. I mean, it's not the detestable thing that's being discussed in the Old Testament, and certainly not what we're discussing here. Part of that's my personal opinion, but clearly Jesus lays out the principle in John 15:13. Jesus saw no contradiction in his affirmations of the law and the role as the suffering, sin-bearing servant of Isaiah 53. Jesus didn't see himself as a victim, but as a priestly offerer. Jesus was unblemished before the cross, and is the only reason he became the substitute for the sins of the world. I would encourage you to look at Mark chapter 10, verse 45, and John chapter 10, verses 11 through 17. All these passages indicate the things that I just said. Moving on. So in other words, I don't think Jesus fits the description of a typical, the problem with human sacrifice it was the murder of innocents. And that's just not what's taking place with the crucifixion. With Isaac, since God's intent never was that Abraham complete the sacrifice, I don't see this as a problem per se. Had Abraham disobeyed the command of the angel to stop, in other words, if Abraham had killed Isaac and had God not punished him for that, then you would have an inconsistency. You would have obviously an endorsement of the practice of human sacrifice. But without the actual completion of the sacrifice, there really can't be a true comparison nor a consistency issue. Typically in Christian theology, this story is seen as a type or an anti-type of the crucifixion. Basically an event that happens in the Old Testament that reflects an event in the New Testament. There's a lot of parallels between what Isaac is put through in Genesis 22 and the crucifixion. Isaac's bound, Christ is bound. Isaac gathers wood, Christ carries his own cross. Both are taken to a hill, both are promised sons, both are innocent, both are willing, and so on. There's many parallels. So from a Christian perspective, this story is oftentimes seen as a teaching story. Also, it's a demonstration of Abraham's faith. So that's the whole point of having the story in the text to begin with. It's not an endorsement of child sacrifice or human sacrifice as practiced by the Canaanites. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to pick up. I'm going to start another video, and I'm going to talk specifically about Jephthah. I think Prof spends a lot of time talking about Jephthah, and I want to give it my full attention. I appreciate it. Thank you.